and welcome to our 10th and final episode of our 2025 live stream series, Wild About Water. My name is Rachel, and I'm a watershed health educator here at the Environmental Learning Center on Clackamas Community College's campus here in Oregon City. I'm so glad that you could join me today. We are talking about water and how it flows. And today in the wetland, it's a pretty gray, kind of foggy-ish day. The birds are chirping. I don't know if you can hear them, but we have a lot of different birds calling today in the wetland. And we saw lots of mallards walking through and egg masses. Spring is definitely coming, and we can tell by not only the plants that are starting to bloom, but the egg masses or for amphibians that are in the wetlands. They've laid their eggs and they will hatch in a few weeks, bringing us more salamanders and frogs. And we're really excited to see them. So I'm glad that you're here, not only to see the end of winter, but the beginning of spring with me, but to talk about water. Today, we will learn about how water flows through the wetland by putting dye into Newell Creek. And we'll get to do our own experiment with how water flows in different rates. So I'm glad that you could join me. And you may have a sheet in front of you that looks like this, an activity sheet. And the title of today's episode is Water on the Move. And the first activity is called Wetland Water Flow. And this is part of our experiment for later in the episode. And it's split into two parts, fast water and slow water. And under each section, it says, predict. When fast water is poured in the model, I think that the collected water will be clean or dirty, and then you'll circle one. Then it says, observe. When fast water is poured in the model, I noticed that blank, and you'll write down what you noticed. And then it says results. When fast water is poured in the model, the collected water was clean or dirty, and you'll circle the answer. Was your prediction correct? Yes or no. You'll circle the answer there, and then you'll explain. So we'll have 2 rounds of the experiment with fast water and slow water, and you will follow along during the episode when we get to that point. And at the bottom, we have our community connections, because at the end of each episode, we want you to be able to take what you learned and take it back out into your own community. Today it says, when water moves slowly through a wetland, it gets blank. In some cases, why is it important for fast-moving water to slow down? And by the end of the episode, you will be able to answer those questions. Now, today, like I said, we're talking all about how water moves and flows. So have any of you ever been in the river in the summertime, feeling how water flows and moves? Maybe one day it's moving pretty fast and you can really feel it pushing against you, or maybe it's moving slow. You might not even notice that it's moving at all. It can be hard to tell how water is flowing unless you're in it, but I've got some pictures here to show you where you can actually see how water is flowing in front of you. If the water is moving fast and flowing at a faster rate, sometimes you can see it on the surface of the water. It feels like it's rushing and there's lots of bubbles and the water splashing, and you can even hear it sometimes. And for slower water, the water looks really calm and almost still, and it may make a different sound, a little bit more calm of a water flowing sound. And here in the wetland behind me, we have Newell Creek flowing through here. And Newell Creek starts here in the wetland, actually, and that's called the headwaters of Newell Creek. And you should be seeing a map of our wetland here, and I've pointed out on the map where the headwaters are. And this is what the headwaters look like. It comes out of under a road up there, that horizontal line, that wall. On the other side is a road, and then the water comes out from under it. It's a mix of storm water and underground springs or underground water sources. And that water flows, and it's the start of a creek. Then just after that, further down, we have the forebay, and that's a wider spot in the creek where the water gets a chance to slow down and pause before it continues on through the creek. And the point of the forebay is to help that water to slow down so that it can be cooled by the shade of the plants in the area, and it gives it a chance for the sediments or any little particles or pieces of rocks or dirt or maybe chemicals or pollutants. When the water slows down, those pieces fall to the bottom of the water down at the bottom of the creek, and the water becomes cleaner and it keeps moving along down the creek cleaner. So that's the point of the forebay. And just after that, where this red circle is, the channel splits. It goes two different directions. And off to the right, Newell Creek continues on, but some of the water gets moved and put into our water quality enhancement channel, which is the wetland that you see behind us. And here's another picture of the wetland up closer. There's lots of plants and animals. And here in that water channel, the water moves much slower and there's a chance for it to, again, cool down and get cleaner, but it also provides habitat and is a resource for lots of different creatures and plants. And it's a really important place here in the wetland. And then after that, once the water spends a little bit of time in our channel, it will come back together with Newell Creek at that second red circle and will continue to flow onto the downstream areas of Newell Creek. So that's a lot of information, but basically the wetland behind me is a water quality enhancement channel, and it slows the water down and cools it down, and it provides habitat, which is really important not only for the water, but for the plants and animals around us. And like I said, it can be hard to tell how water flows. And here in the wetland, it moves pretty slow. So we wondered, how does water flow here in the wetland? And we found that there are scientists that have been able to find a way to better understand the flow of water. And one of those scientists, his name is Rob Livingstone. He's from Clackamas Water Environment Services. And he came a couple years ago to tell us all about how they use dye, like a colored dye, to put in the water, and it shows us the flow of that water. And this is a photo of Rob when he came and did an interview with us and told us all about the research and how they're able to learn more about the flow of water using this dye test. And I'm going to show you a video now. We have a great video of the dye test happening right here at the Environmental Learning Center. So go ahead and watch them pour the dye in and see how it flows. That bright green dye is being poured into the water, and although it looks really bright and maybe like it shouldn't be there, that dye is actually safe for plants and animals. It does not hurt the environment at all. Eventually it dissipates and it's not even there anymore. See how that water is flowing and carrying that dye around the bend? This is a sped up video so that we can see the dye moving more clearly, but you can see how the right side, that dye seems to spread. That's the water flowing. And the mallards are even enjoying the water. They don't mind the dye at all. Yeah, so big thank you to Rob Livingstone and Clackamas Water Environment Services. They helped us to do that test a few years ago, and it told us a lot about the water flow here at the Environmental Learning Center. Now, it did bring up some questions, though. How does the flow of water impact the water quality? This is a question that scientists ask all over the world, and even here at the Environmental Learning Center. How does water flow impact water quality? When I say water quality, what I mean is how healthy the water is. So how clean, clear, and cool it is. So the flow, like I said, there's a couple different types of water flow. It can range from super fast to really slow. And so if we compare those two in an experiment, we'll see what the differences are in water quality. We'll compare the two water qualities of both of those. And when we do an experiment, there's an important way that we do them. There's specific steps that we take. And that is called the scientific method. And I'd love to show you all the steps of that now. The first one, of course, is to ask a question. Say, I wonder how the flow of water impacts water quality. That's our question for today. Then you predict and you say, I think this will happen. You make a smart guess. And so with this, we'll make a prediction today before our experiment. Then we set up that experiment and you say, I notice. You take observations or you pay attention and notice what's happening during the experiment. And then at the end, you have a conclusion, and that's when you get a result. And the result is the knowledge or something that we learned from the experiment. It may not always give us the answer, but we will always learn something. So let's get started on our experiment today. What I have today are 2 different trays, and I've made little model landscapes for us using mud and plants and rocks and other natural materials here right from our wetlands. And I made them into a riverbed, and I'll give you a little closer look if I can. So it's mud, but this riverbed right here, we're going to pour some water in, and it's going to flow through. It's going to flow into one of these trays. Then, based on the flow of the water, whether it's fast or slow, we'll see what the water quality is like. So on your sheets, go ahead and take a moment and predict. When fast water is poured in the model, I think that the collected water will be clean or dirty. Take a moment and make your prediction. And now we're going to do our experiment. And first, we're going to start with the fast water. So fast water first. I'm going to pour this water in. I'm going to pour it pretty quick to emulate fast water. Okay. What are we noticing? We poured that water pretty fast. Poured about 3 cups of that water. Did we notice anything about when the water flowed? I noticed that the water didn't stay only in the channel. It kind of flooded out. Sometimes faster water can go up off of riverbanks and can start to creep out of the riverbank. So that was an interesting thing to notice. And let's take a look at what our water quality is like. It's kind of hard to see, but it's gotten kind of dirty. Let's see. I have to pour a little bit of this water out so you can see it. Can you see it okay? All right. How about right here? How's that look, guys? All right. So yeah, it's a little dirty. When I did this experiment before, the water was a little bit dirtier than this. So my prediction was that the water would be dirty. And I would say that, yeah, there are quite a bit of particles down in the bottom. You may not be able to see them on the camera, but the water was a little dirty. So we'll say that the results are when the fast water was poured in the model, the collected water was dirty, and that's our results. And then you'll write down if your prediction was correct or not. And then you'll explain. And to explain what happened, when water flows through a riverbank or through an area really fast, it can pick up the sediments along the riverbed and it moves them downriver. And when we collected that water, there was lots of sediments mixed up into the water. So that's why our collected water was dirty. Let's do our second experiment with slow water. So we've got our landscape here. I'm going to pour this water really slowly. All right. What are you noticing? Is anything different here? See how we doing on water? Okay. All right, that should be good. I don't want to overfill our tray again. All right, so take note of what you noticed for your slow water. And now let's take a look at the results. So, do we think that this water is pretty clean or pretty dirty? Now, there are some particles in there, but in reality, when water goes slower down through a riverbed, it stays pretty clean. And there are some particles, just because this is an experiment, this is a smaller scale, and sometimes experiments don't always work out the way we want them to. So you will see some particles, but in reality, slower water picks up less particles, and it gets a chance to slow down, and any particles that were in the water get to settle out to the bottom of the creek, and that clean water glides over the top of those and continues on downstream. Did you notice anything else when the water was flowing? I noticed that the water stayed within the channel. It didn't continue to overflow or go too far up onto the landscape. That was an interesting thing to note. So, for our results, when the slow water was poured in the model, the collected water was cleaner than if we were to pour it quickly. And you want to circle and say if your prediction was correct or not, and then explain about how slow water gives a chance for sediments to settle out down to the bottom of the riverbed. Now, I'm so glad that you got to be here for our experiment, and hopefully you learned something new today. And now is the time to ask any questions. I would love to answer some of your questions on our last episode together. And I have a special guest here who's going to bring in some questions that came in earlier yesterday. Sarah.
Hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Sarah Bidwell. I'm the kids education coordinator, and we did get a few questions.
Wonderful.
So let's see what people are curious about. So Jesse in Oregon City is wondering if there are animals that live in the muck on the bottom of the wetland. So do you recall in some previous episodes, do you remember when we put the waders on?
Yes.
Went into the wetland, and each of us really sunk down into the muck. So do you think there are creatures that live down in that muck? And what is that muck?
That's a great question.
So that muck is a lot of these sediments that get settled down as the water slows down. It's also old leaves and needles and plant material that's kind of breaking down. And there are actually a lot of creatures that live down in that muck. Like in the wintertime, you might have turtles or even bullfrogs that are kind of just going to sleep down in the muck for the wintertime. And then a lot of those invertebrates. Do you remember when we dipped in the water with the nets and we found the small creatures? A lot of like the dragonfly nymphs and the damselfly nymphs and predaceous diving beetles, a lot of those small creatures find shelter down in that muck. They also find things to eat down there. So it's an important habitat. So that's a great question, Jesse. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
Let's see. Are there any other questions being sent in, Michelle? Okay. So Marcus in Happy Valley is wondering, what happens to the green dye in the water? Where does it go?
That's a great question. Yeah, it was really bright in the water, and it seems like it would stay there forever. But that green dye is made up of something that can dissolve, and it falls apart in the water over time, and it will either settle to the bottom in the water and dissolve, or it will just be absorbed by other plants or in the soils, and it's not harmful. Right. Do you know anything else about the green dye? Because that's what I've heard.
I was just going to say, you know, in the video, when they put the dye in the beginning, it was super bright, right?
Super bright.
And then as it moved and snaked its way through our wetland, it got less bright and less bright and less bright. So by the time that the water goes back into the channel on the other side of our site, there's very little dye left. It's really just kind of dissipated. And it hasn't hurt any plants or animals.
Yeah, we saw the mallards swimming in it. They didn't seem to mind.
Yeah.
So
all right.
Awesome.
Good deal. This has been such a fun series. And
it has been.
You know, I wanted also to share with you that previously when Rachel was talking and doing the experiments, there was a bald eagle that flew overhead. So
Really?
it's so cool. You know, you always see new and different things here. That was really exciting.
Oh.
And there are so many birds out this morning calling and setting up their territories and getting ready to build their nests. We've got a nest here on the
Yes.
table. This is the nest of a bush tit, and they build these pendulous nests, and there's a little hole in it, and that's where the adults go down and the eggs are down inside. Can
Wow.
you see what the nest is made out of?
Ooh, yeah.
What are some things that you notice, Rachel?
It looks like a lot of moss.
A lot of moss and some lichen. Isn't
Mhm.
that amazing that a bird that could fit in your hand can take those little bits and weave it all together to make a nest like this?
That's
So cool.
amazing.
Yeah, so a lot of activity at the ELC today and all spring long.
Of
Yeah.
course. Yeah. Thank you so much for
Oh, you
coming
bet.
and bringing questions. And
Sure.
thank you to all the other guests that we've had on our episodes. It was great to get to know some new people and share their different skills and interests. And it's been a really great series. And
Sure has.
I'm so glad that we got to do it together and learn something new in the wetland. Do you have any last things you want to say?
No, I just encourage people to come out. You know, if you, maybe some of you might be able to come out for a field trip this spring, but even if you're not coming out for a field trip, this place is free and open to the public. So you can come after school, you can come on the weekend, you can come this summer, bring a picnic. It is so fun to come and visit it in all the different seasons and see all the new animals and plants that are popping up. We're starting to see more rabbits hopping around, and the frogs are starting to come out. The wetland is full of salamander egg masses, so those are going to be hatching out soon. So always so much going on, and this place is welcome for all.
Yes, yeah. We hope that you can come visit us, whether it's field trip or with your family or friends. Come and visit us anytime. We'd love to have you, and
Yeah.
it's a great spot to come relax. So I guess until next time, stay curious, get outside to explore, and I'll see you around the wetland.